Thank you very much. Very good to see you this evening. So, if you've not heard of Good Energy, we've been around about 20 years and listed on AIM for the last 13 or so. Our profile, for both good or ill, has increased somewhat dramatically over the last 18 months because obviously, having taken over as CEO in May of 2021, I found myself in the teeth of an extraordinary period in the UK's energy markets and indeed its energy industry, which happily we've come through and are on the other are on the other side of. And the company is a renewable energy specialist. So I'll talk to you about that. But we think, well positioned for the transition we must all make as individuals, as business owners, to decarbonise the UK's energy grid and use electricity in a much more sophisticated way as it becomes all-pervasive, including how we drive, how we heat our homes. And we intend to build a company, and in some ways already have a company, that's at the forefront of that change. So what do we do today? Well, really three things. We are in the energy supply business. We supply about 90,000 metres. They are homes, they are small businesses, and they are some larger consumers, which tend to be sort of the offices of the likes of PricewaterhouseCoopers and some of the big city banks and law firms. And that is because our supply is the greenest supply on the UK energy market. We can demonstrate to customers that we match their consumption pretty much 100% of the time with renewable generation sourced from small generators. And increasingly for corporates, that is a key part of their ESG reporting requirements, but we supply households as well. Our most significant business is the one in the middle, though. We are the generator's friend. So we are the largest voluntary administrator, which means that the regulations don't force us to do that. We're the second largest overall administrator of what's the feed-in tariff scheme. So the FIT scheme is the original UK domestic solar scheme, which guaranteed a rate for people who put solar panels on their roofs. We're a big administrator of that. We are also active in the market for solar generators more broadly. We will install panels and we will pay rates for people outside of the FIT scheme as well. So we are the generator's friend. And we are a player in the transition of transport to a green transport world through our status as the largest investor in ZapMap. Now, if you drive an electric vehicle, there is a 4 in 5 chance, since that's their market penetration, that you've heard of ZapMap. ZapMap is an app that makes driving and owning an EV easier, and we'll come to talk about that in the presentation. So that's what we do today, and we are a business in the midst of a transition. So I said we were 20 years old. The overall mission of the business hasn't changed. We aspire, and we're in business, to power a cleaner and greener world. But the way we do that is changing, and that change is accelerating. We used to actually own our own generating assets. So the original customers and the original shareholders in Good Energy helped build wind farms in Cornwall and Yorkshire and solar farms around the UK. However, they were a drop in the ocean. Whilst they were significant 15 years ago, as the green generation was just starting, they were a drop in the ocean now, where there are multi-billion-pound offshore wind projects starting each year. And we've sold those assets. And with them, we've taken most, if not all, of the company's debt away and have significant cash for future investment. Our focus is much more now on supply and services. So we want to help homes and businesses make that transition to a much more carbon-free state. And that's our ambition. We want to, between the businesses I've been talking about, get to about 1 million homes and businesses, supporting them in their energy transition. And at the date of our last set of results, we were about 750,000 homes and businesses, so we're well underway to that target, which is a sort of an overall signal, more than a financial indicator necessarily, but it just should leave my own staff and our shareholders very clear that what we're about is building new services to help people consume green energy rather than necessarily green supply itself. Because this is where we're trying to get to. This is what's on the wall of the offices. We want to basically get consumers to a greener place, which should cut their carbon and save them money. And we will do that by not only having a green supply offerer, but also installing solar panels, installing heat pumps, offering the best services on the market for people who are generating their own power, and through ZapMap, having services for electric vehicle drivers that make it easier to own one of them. And that status in the EV market is important because usually it's an electric vehicle which is the first piece of green technology that a household will adopt. Once you've got an EV, you're 7 times more likely, for pretty obvious reasons, I suppose, to then be interested in solar panels because your electricity bill has gone up, and that then leads on to other adoption as well. I think one last point to make in terms of introduction, which you wouldn't normally make, but it's obviously been a period of considerable turmoil in the UK energy supply market. In fact, 60% of the UK's energy suppliers failed in the autumn of 2021, and we all, as bill payers, picked up the tab for their uncleared energy position. Now, there's a long lecture to be given about the regulatory and other failure that drove that, but the reason to mention it here is that we are a well-governed public company. We obviously believe in the transparency that comes with that, and we have a strong board to oversee that. And Will Whitehorn, for example, our chair, is somebody who spent most of his career working alongside Richard Branson and therefore is a very experienced sort of entrepreneur and leader, and we have very strong governance on the regulatory side as well. So I'm going to take each of those 3 elements in turn, just give a bit more detail on them. First, the supply side of the business. So for some people, this won't matter at all. For green-minded consumers and businesses who need to report on their carbon position, these credentials are important. And generally speaking, our ability to match the supply of electricity with sourcing it from over 1,900 small generators. So if you see a sort of small solar farm and you're out in the countryside, or a farm with 1 or 2 wind turbines, increasingly we get quite a lot of power from anaerobic digestion, which is again a farm sideline. The chances are it will be us sourcing that power. And quite a lot of bodies regard us as the greenest supplier on the marketplace. We're also quite proud of the rating on the right of the slide there. According to Trustpilot, we are probably offering the best service of any UK energy retailer. That means stickier relationships. So we have customers who've been with us for over 10 years because they buy into the purpose, and we treat them well when they deal with us. And our operational highlights are pretty strong. I've talked about the proposition. We're early adopters of a system called Kraken, which won't mean very much to you unless you're a close observer of the energy market. Kraken is the software developed by Octopus Energy as a more efficient customer management solution. It basically enables you to serve your customers better with fewer, better trained staff, and as a system that is much better attuned to the dynamic future of the energy market, where people will be eventually being charged different rates at different times of the day. We are an early adopter of that system, and we use it very well, and that enables our future growth. Smart metering is another part of this. Again, it's a topic that people perhaps have strong personal views on. Over 50% now of our supply base is on a smart meter. They're on a SMETS 2 smart meter, which are the ones that were later in coming into the marketplace and work better, frankly. Again, an important enabler of a more flexible and dynamic energy market. And we trade our own energy, and that's one of the reasons we're still here, because there is an enormously complex wholesale market for energy. We've all become amateur experts on it in the last 18 months or so because it's affected all of our bills. But our ability to sort of trade our position and to understand the particular dynamics of trading a 100% green proposition is an important part of our resilience. So, what do we do in terms of energy services? Well, we are the generator's friend. So we aspire to be the go-to company for solar generators. And that is, I think, the most significant growth option ahead of us. After a lull, the solar market, in terms of number of installs, doubled over the course of the last couple of years for pretty obvious reasons. The cost of installation has come down, as all technologies do, and obviously the high cost of power makes this quite a compelling proposition for a lot of households. So we have moved into that market. In fact, last week we announced the acquisition of a business called Wessex Eco Energy. They are an installer, a high-quality, highly trusted installer based in Dorchester, so covering the south of England, which is possibly the least controversial thing I could say today, which is the better area of the country for solar generation for obvious reasons. You do generally see lower yields in Scotland. Anyway, we can install panels, and that is an acquisition of a profitable business which we are expecting to grow and remain profitable and be earnings accretive very strongly by 2025. We then back that up with products for people who've got panels, frankly. So we're the most innovative supplier in the feed-in tariff market. We are the only provider who can actually pay you for the energy you export as opposed to a deemed or assumed amount. So if you're a fit customer at the moment, they just assume what you're generating and give you a flat fee. We can use a smart meter to actually pay you for what you export. Power for Good, which is our latest product, is one of the better paying or higher paying tariffs for people who don't qualify for the FIT scheme. The FIT schemes are closed. So we're aspiring to build long sticky relationships with people with their own solar panels. And we're a heat pump installer as well. So whilst there's genuine, real sort of here and now growth in terms of solar panel installation, heat pumps are projected to grow quickly and are just beginning to get started. But clearly the future of domestic heating for a large number of UK households is a transition to a heat pump. And we bought the installation business from one of the suppliers that didn't make it through the crisis, Igloo Energy, at the tail end of last year. We've rebranded it as Good Energy, so those guys doing the installation there do work for us and they are wearing our kit. And we are marketing heat pump installation both to our own customer base and to interested households. This again is particularly applicable to our target market, so green-minded consumers, larger households. There's a very significant market in the UK, about 1.2 million households, who are not on the gas main grid. So chances are somebody here may be in part of that, which means that they're reliant on oil tanks or bottled gas for their heating. And that's the first part of sort of first piece of technology that the government will require people to replace sooner rather than later. So there's a particularly strong target market for them there. And then the last part of the business just to discuss is then the electrification of transport. So electric vehicles have been the fastest growing category of new car sales in the UK for at least the last 18 months. Ignore anything you read in the Daily Telegraph on the subject. They are not going to cause the collapse of multi-storey car parks or bridges. It is very clearly the future of private road transport in the UK. And we invested in ZapMap in 2019 initially and have followed up with subsequent investment rounds. And in fact, ZapMap closed its Series A round last year and was valued at £26 million with us and FleetCor, the fuel card providers, as the main two investors. So what is it? Well, it's an app, as I said, that makes owning and driving an electric vehicle easier. It will tell you where all the public charge points are. It will tell you whether they're working or not. It will tell you whether you have the right equipment to connect to them. It will plan a route from A to B, telling you where to charge your car. It will let you pay for that charge as well. So you often see people standing at charge points with cards and phones and other things trying to sort of figure out what the payment is. There's a simple way to pay through ZapMap as well. And it is working. So it has a penetration of about, as I said, 80% of the UK's electric vehicle owners. It is by far and away the highest, the most successful app for this market. We've seen over 1 million downloads, some of the statistics there. So that market share has been achieved without any meaningful marketing spend whatsoever. The effort's all been in generating the difficult-to-reach data that powers this. And we are building it into a business with about 3 revenue streams. So there's a significant market for the data that we get from ZapMap users because it is by far the best source of behavioural data on how people are actually driving and charging electric vehicles. So all the charge points, the DVLA, banks, consulting firms, you name it, are buying the data back from ZapMap. It's a very familiar model to me, having seen it in the price comparison world with insurance price comparison. It is a subscription product. So if you want to use it in your car, if you want the sort of value-added functionality, you pay for a subscription. There are about 10,000 paying subscribers for ZapMap, and that is growing. And it offers a product called Zap Pay, which, as I said, is a simple way to pay for your charging, where we take a small clip every time somebody pays for charging. And there is a reasonable take-up of that product from the charge point operators. After all, why wouldn't they? They've all put the capital into building out these networks. They now need to generate usage, and ZapMap speaks for the user. It's also a fleet product. So people who run fleets of vans and cars for deliveries are also transitioning their fleets to electric vehicles. And with the interest from FleetCor, we've built out sort of equivalent, I suppose, of the old-fashioned car fuel cards for electric vehicle chargers so that employees can charge without touching their own bank accounts. And a couple of financial points to summarise, and then we are on to questions. So we actually, a public company, we report in a lot of detail. We actually had our AGM last week and published the annual report on top of that, but some highlights are here. So I've worked in all sorts of technology companies before I joined Good Energy. I never managed to achieve 70% year-on-year revenue growth, and I'm not particularly boasting about it now either, but obviously you can see a function of the energy market that we've just had, and that we saw revenue grow 70% in the course of the last year. It will come down again as energy prices soften, but we have managed to sustain sort of through the crisis with a bit of a dip in 2021, a reasonable level of gross profit. And then two key considerations for a small cap company, especially one in our market sector. We have a lot of cash. So in the annual report, we declare that we had £25 million on cash and cash equivalents. We actually issued a trading statement with our AGM last week, and that figure is now £35 million. That's partly because HM Government is a better and quicker payer than most customers are, and we were obviously receiving the money from the government through the winter for customer support. So some of that will unwind, but we are in a very cash advantageous position. We have little to no debt. We have a little bit of bond outstanding. It's well less than £5 million. And that means that we can both cushion ourselves from the working capital flows that the energy market drives, but also we're in a position to fund some of our future investment from our own balance sheet. And we have had a year of pretty strong profitability, so just shy of 9 million in profit from current operations. And that is partly because we saw a realised gain from ZapMap. It's also because, as I started off by saying, we have a more resilient model than most energy providers. We are exempt from the price cap because of the genuine green position as opposed to certificate-driven position, which means that we've got more pricing flexibility than many. We're sitting, by the way, at the moment at about an £80 premium at typical domestic consumption for our standard variable tariff. So a bit of an ability to defend the business there because of the nature of the way we source it. But we are a profitable and cash-rich business. We're actually sitting on a market capitalisation which is somewhere akin to the cash balance at the moment, which says a lot, I think, about some of the liquidity challenges in AIM stocks sometimes. But I think we have plenty of fuel for growth and a secure base from which to grow. So that's us in a nutshell, and I would argue that we are a good investment, partly because we're relatively cheap for the beginning of this story, but we're very well positioned, particularly for the UK's early adopters, as they make this transition into green fuel, green transport, green heating, generating their own. And we have a customer base that will adopt this quickly. We have a positioning that is focused very much on people who want to generate their own power. And we are likely to be one of the first companies, therefore, that sort of eventually resemble what we need the UK's energy market to look like, which is a much more decentralised, much more dynamic environment where people are choosing to use their stored power from their battery when we know the grid is most expensive, and then sell back into the grid at periods of high sunlight. We will be one of the first to facilitate that vision of what the future UK's energy future grid is. And for that reason, I would say we're a good investment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nigel. As I mentioned, if you have a question, please wait for the microphone. There's Peter coming over. Thank you.
You mentioned that your supply was almost entirely renewable energy. Given the intermittency of wind and solar, can you explain a bit more how you manage to be almost 100% renewable? Yeah. That's my first question. And the second one is regarding the services you're looking to provide. If you could give a few examples of types of services. Thank you.
Sure. So on the intermittency point, which obviously we get a lot, our precise data is that for 96% of the half-hourly slots, and that's eventually how electricity is traded in the UK, we have 100% matched to green power. So there'll be 1 or 2 half hours where we miss out on it. And the way we do it is that the sources we've got sort of tend to balance each other out. So we have quite a significant amount of base load from anaerobic digestion, which is weather independent, really. And then we carefully balance where we're getting the rest of the power from. So we have obviously wind, hydro, and solar in the mix. We have a backup deal with one of the big offshore wind providers. So if our small generators can't do it, then we'll get it from the offshore wind provider. And we tend to find that solar and wind usually give a sort of natural hedge against each other. And the last thing is, we sort of cap our scale. So it's easy for me to say this. If I was running British Gas's portfolio of domestic customers, I couldn't make that point. But with a sort of controlled scale, we can find enough power, enough of the time to make that match. And obviously it's central to our propositions. It's all very carefully audited. And the services really is around, one, we will install the technology for you. So we will install solar, we'll install a heat pump. So we have a sort of reasonably digital journey around sort of surveying the home, understanding what sort of size of equipment is needed, what roof, what you can generate from your roof. We will install it, usually leading edge heat pumps, battery and solar solutions. At the moment, we're geographically limited in that, so it's mostly in the south of England. We are looking to acquire further solar installation businesses in other geographies as well. We will maintain it, and then we will give you the sort of more, I suppose, niche tariff package that then goes with these technologies. So we will offer you a certain rate for your export if you're also on supply with us. And I suppose the last service we offer is then electric vehicle for EV drivers is ZapMap and ZapMap subscriptions, and it will flow into tariffs that are very bespoke for these kind of customers. So time of use based tariffs for electric vehicle drivers that particularly incentivize overnight charging and that kind of thing. So those are the services we provide.
Thank you. And if I may, I just remembered another question I had is regarding, you mentioned you have a trading function in your business, and I was curious as to whether or not you have a hedging strategy and so on, because obviously during the energy crisis, a lot of utilities went bust because they didn't have a hedging strategy.
Yes, I can remember being lectured by Kwasi Kwarteng about the fact that he thought hedging was a sort of too risky for Bulb, the business that was then nationalised. We do have a hedging strategy, and we've always been very risk averse in our hedging approach, and we report on it. So our trading update last week will have told investors that we were 100% hedged through to the start of the winter and then 50% hedged for the winter season coming. And what we try and do is basically buy ahead by about, we have a 6-month forward hedge approach. So we buy a sixth of what we need each month to then be sort of fully hedged by the time the season starts. And that along with the pricing flexibility that we've got, which others don't have, kept us sort of out of hot water through the season. And we have, whilst we don't have limitless trading lines, because those days are over, we have enough trading capacity with the banks and the other energy companies who trade electricity to be able to do that.
Okay, a couple of questions. We'll start at the back first, please, and then the gentleman. Yep.
Is this working?
Yep.
It is now, yeah.
So the corollary of why invest is about returns. I just checked online, wonderful thing about online, 36% down in the last year with a forward yield projection of around 1%.
Yeah.
So would you like to comment on the opposite side of why invest?
Yeah, sure. So on the yield side, on dividend yields, we do pay a dividend because some of our investors want one, but our dividend policy is very clear. We're investing for growth, we're investing behind services, so the cash is going into sort of investment and acquisition more than it's going into paying a dividend. On the share price itself, I mean, we're an AIM company, which is a pretty illiquid market. The sentiment on small energy businesses isn't great. And we say to investors, and we said in our results presentation, look, our cash balance plus our stake in ZapMap is worth far more than the market capitalization of the business, and you get a supply business for nothing, if you like, in that scenario. So we would hope that we'd anticipate the price going up, and that's certainly what we're trying to sort of build towards. I guess we await a bit of a re-rating from other investors as that sort of the transition I'm talking about kicks in. But you're right, I mean, had you asked me that 2 years ago, it would have been a slightly different picture, but it's certainly not a dividend yielding stock. It's an attempt to get a growth business, which we think the market will re-rate in time.
Thank you. Question here, please.
Sorry, it's maybe similar to about dividend yield, but a few years ago you were paying a half-decent dividend, and then you paid nothing.
Yeah.
Now why didn't you restore it to what it was before COVID?
So a few years ago, we were a generator and supplier, so a utility company, and people expect utility companies to pay dividends, and we'd taken money off the shareholders to build the generation assets. Obviously, COVID just a cautionary, it predates my arrival at the company, I should say, but I know from talking to people that a lot of energy suppliers just cut the dividend in COVID. I think with the sale of the generating assets and the return of that, pay down the debt, take the cash for future growth, we've got a new strategy. We are trying to grow a services business, and that means we need the capital to invest behind those businesses more than we do necessarily pay the dividend. So we're very clear that some dividend is payable, but it's not the right thing to do for a company investing for future growth to pay a sort of utility type yield, which is what we were doing. That's the board's view.
Okay, and secondly, the jury's out on heat pumps. Is that, I keep reading that heat pumps aren't what they're meant to be. And secondly, people are saying you should, if you're going to get solar panels, you should buy batteries so you can use your power. So how does that affect you? Because would you be encouraging people to buy batteries? Or are you saying no, don't do it because we want your cheap energy?
No, we would like you to buy it. We think if it's right for the customer, and there's some houses where batteries aren't so great, by the way, where if you've got basically a smaller roof, you can't generate enough surplus to make the battery worthwhile. But we install usually the solar jobs that we do have a battery alongside them as well. Batteries happen to be a very profitable part of the installation, and the future energy provider effectively will be something where you can look at your phone, and you won't have to do anything. The data will be doing it for you, but we'll be sort of saying, okay, now's the right time to take the energy from your battery. Now's the right time to sell it in the grid, and we're optimizing for you, and that gives us enough, frankly, to both provide you with a paying service, but also trade the excess energy when that occurs. So actually, we think batteries are a good thing. We encourage them, and they are an important part of a flexible energy setup, which is what we're trying to get to.
Question over here, please.
Oh, heat pumps, I should answer a minute.
Given the profile of the company, how do you see, from the perspective of the consumer, the need for education and the mammoth task that this presents, given the various elements, what the government does, and all this kind of mix of elements, because obviously what you are doing, is quite good, but it's like a drop in the ocean.
It's certainly, supporting the renewable generators we do is a drop in the ocean in terms of the UK's grid. We trade a terawatt of power every year, and the United Kingdom uses, I think, roughly 140 terawatts of power. So we're not a big player in terms of the overall greening of the UK's grid. But what we're about is for the consumers who want to get ahead of the transition, if you like. That's our target market. They tend to be greener-minded and sort of greener-educated consumers anyway. So there's a bit of a sense that we are sort of targeting the at least semi-converted, if you like. But then I think you're right. There is we have quite a large marketing team, and we need to do a good job, frankly, on terms of the education. The sales process for these products, particularly heat pumps, is quite a long sales cycle. It's quite a consultative one. It's quite data-driven. So there's a lot to sort of perfect there, which, as we scale, we will do. But at the moment, I would say the straight answer is we're targeting the green audience that gets it and wants to engage, and therefore we've got enough demand for what we do. But there is a bigger need which is going to come.
I think we need, millions and millions of companies like you to really fulfill the needs everywhere.
It's interesting, Wessex, who the business we acquired last week, so a big solar panel installer in Dorset, tend to focus on larger houses. They haven't spent a penny on marketing either, because their best marketing is word of mouth, which is people looking at their phone app, showing their neighbour that at the moment they're making £80 a week out of exporting energy and haven't spent a penny on electricity for the last month, and that sort of thing, and that suddenly gets the penny to drop. I should answer the heat pumps question briefly as well.
Sorry, I interrupted you.
Yeah, just to say, heat pumps have become a controversial point. In fact, energy transition is sort of the front line of the culture war to some extent, which is an odd thing. Heat pumps done right are a very effective technology, and the evidence for that is that they are the predominant domestic heating source across most of Scandinavia, where it's pretty cold. But done right means correct measurement of the sort of heat needs of the home, so room sizes, radiator sizes, insulation, and we're not competing to be the cheapest installer of a heat pump in the UK. We're competing to do the best job. So, for example, on average, we change about 4 radiators in every heat pump installation we do, just to make to upgrade the home's sort of heat output to deal with the fact that it's a sort of slower, lower heat source, always on thing. I think there's a lot of debate about it, but it is going to be the winning technology for a large proportion of the UK's domestic environment.
Lovely. Nigel, I had a quick one. We're conscious of our time here. The kind of the market cap kind of disconnect to the cash position, at least, and how you described. When I first looked at Good Energy some years ago, it was a very, very different business to what you have today. I think some of that disconnect is people haven't realised how much the business has changed, and they still have the idea of the old generation business.
I think that's probably true. So, I mean, we were known as quite a campaigning business, and we built some quite eye-catching things. It was the UK's first commercial wind farm, actually. It's in Delabole near Tintagel in Cornwall. So we were very well known for that. That brought, from a professional investor's point of view, that brought a particular concern around the debt. All I would say is that, I mean, the 2 analysts who cover the company in terms of the stock market have got target prices for us in excess of £4. And actually do write sort of publicly about we are confused about the valuation of this business. It doesn't make any sense on the fundamentals. So all I can do is keep banging on about it and keep showing the delivery of our services approach, and that it should change.
Lovely. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you.
So.